God, we just come before you and we give you this time. And whatever it is you have for us, I pray that I will be silenced so that you will be loud, so that your beautiful message that you have ordained since the beginning of time will bring truth and life and fill this space with hope. And so it's in your name we pray. Amen. All right, so I want to start with a story. So January 28th, 2022 was the third best day of my life. So I had a great wedding. My first son was born, and then Claire was born January 28th. And she was a force to be reckoned with from the beginning. She was born at 9 pounds, 11 ounces. I always say she was my 911 baby. Get her out. And I had a C-section for all of you. Like, how? So she came out, and she was healthy. We got sent home. Everything was great, or so we thought. And 2 days later, I took her to her normal doctor's appointment, and our doctor said, her coloring is a little off. I think maybe we need to do some blood work and check her jaundice numbers. Not an atypical experience. We had to kind of go through some of that with Levi as well. So we went and got the blood work done, and she said, it's just not where it should be for 2 days old. So why don't you guys go to the hospital for a couple days? They'll do the light treatment, very standard procedure, nothing to really worry about. Go ahead, do that. So Claire and I spent 24 hours in the hospital. Nurses, doctors, everybody was incredibly reassuring. This is normal. You'll be out of here 24 hours, no big deal, which we were, and that was awesome. So went home. A couple days later, we had our blood drawn again, and her numbers were starting to go back up again. Very atypical. No, in the wrong way, going in the wrong direction. Shouldn't have happened. Usually that first 24-hour hospitalization, everything's fine. So numbers kind of start creeping up, and the doctor says, let's just keep an eye on it. Numbers kind of kept creeping up. No idea why. Our doctor, God bless her name is Dr. Hart, and she was like, I really think you guys need to go back to the hospital again. And so we did, Claire and I, another 2 days in the hospital. And I'm a strong extrovert, and being in a quiet hospital during COVID was really terrible for me. Not to mention, they didn't know what was wrong. I had numerous doctors in there. I mean, they were calling specialists to try to figure out why are her numbers not going down. It shouldn't be that way. There's no reason that this is happening. And I spent a couple of hard days in the hospital, and her numbers went back down, and they sent us home. I mean, that whole time was so stressful, but they sent us home. And they're like, this is great. You guys are going to be great. But in my gut, I just said, but we just did this, and I'm not confident that everything's going to be fine. Sure enough, numbers started going back up again. And actually, I'm so sorry. Numbers did not start going back up, but we still had to do the blood work. And I got that first call from the doctor, but at that point, hearing from the doctor was more regular than talking to my own husband. And you get that pit in your stomach, and she had said, the numbers are down. For the first time out of the hospital, the numbers were down in almost a month. But I still wasn't confident because they still didn't know why her numbers had gone the way they had gone. And so they were saying maybe there's a thyroid issue, maybe there's a liver issue. We're just really not sure why her body is behaving in this way. I mean, there was a time, parents, I don't know if you ever had, hopefully you've never had this. There was a morning I woke up and I truly had to surrender her life to Jesus because I was like, I don't know what's wrong. They don't know what's wrong. We just know she's not okay. But there was one morning, and Levi's birthday, their birthdays are a month apart. It was on the horizon. I think it was like that next weekend, and I just was like, Lord, I just want to celebrate his birthday. I mean, this month has been so stressful, so terrible. I've been checking her skin color like every day. We had to go to the hospital, by the way, and have her do blood tests like every 2 days. And I just want to celebrate Levi's birthday. That's it. And I remember sitting at the table, my kitchen table moment, and the Lord just so graciously showed me in the last month of terrible, terrible days. I mean, nobody wants to say, okay, Lord, if I get days, if I get weeks, if I get months. No one ever wants to have to say that about their child. But I sat there, and the Lord was like, but there was joy. Like, you had good moments. You had peace. Like, you had these fun times with your son. You had these beautiful moments with your family. And it was in that moment, this profound moment, that God taught me how to be grateful in the midst of the worst. Yeah. And he taught me this lesson that I will never forget, never. That even in the midst of your hardest days, your worst nightmare, you can still have joy. You can still have goodness. And it was like these memories started piercing this heavy darkness. And I felt that joy. And it wasn't like I'm jumping up, bounding around with excitement, but it was like, okay, God showed me no matter what you go through, you will get through it. And you will have joy. Not like abounding, yay, hooray, circus joy, but you will have joy. You can have joy. And I tell you that story because God, praise the Lord, not every story ends this way. Claire is almost two, and a ball of energy and very jaundice free. And so God healed her. But I say all of that to say we're 2 years later, and I'm still learning how to practice gratitude. I'm still very much trying to understand how can I take these hard moments and still find gratitude. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about why do we need to practice gratitude. And I'm a professor, actually, also. And so I'm going to do the last thing you're supposed to ever do as a professor. I'm going to tell you the answer right now. So if this is all I get and you want to go to sleep after this, here's your answer. So I think there's 3 reasons why we should practice gratitude. Number 1, it points us towards God. You don't have to pull those up yet, Tammy. Number 2, it changes us. And number 3, it points others to God. Okay? So my first thought here is it points us towards God. So in the Christian life, one of our primary jobs is to draw close to God, right? I talked about this in my call to worship a few weeks ago, where the Bible literally says, if you abide in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Our job as Christians is to draw close to God, to cling to him, to be near him. Yeah. And if you think about it, the subject of all of our praise, of all of our gratitude, in fact, is God. So there's this verse in James that says, every good and perfect gift is from above. Tammy, you can pull that one up. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, meaning everything good we are given in this world is a gift from God. And so if we, in our practice of gratitude, say, thank you for whatever, thank you for that smile, thank you for that flower, thank you for that burrito, right? We think, oh, it's not just thank you, someone, something. Thank you, God, for these things. So gratitude is an opportunity for us to say, oh, that's right. The good gifts are from God, so I'm going to look back up to God and practice my gratitude, which connects me to God. Because gratitude is essentially just thankfulness to someone for something or someone. It's really simple, right? Thank you so much for making that meal for me. Thank you so much for opening my drawer. Thank you so much for whatever. That's gratitude. It's that simple. And so instead of just saying, great, that's awesome, I'm grateful for these things, we're saying, I'm grateful to you, God, for these things. It also points us to God because it puts us in our place. The very first book or verse of the Bible in Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All of it. He created it, and it goes on, right? The creation story. God created it all. He's like an artist that created the most beautiful canvas. The world is our beautiful canvas, and then he says, and I'm going to paint you into it. And when we see ourselves as a part of the canvas versus the painter or the artist, we recognize, oh, I'm not the one who makes the sunrise in the morning. I'm not the one who turns all the gears. I'm not the one who created really anything. God did it all. And when we, look to creation or we look at the things that God has created, it reminds us we are not God. It puts us back in our place. It helps remind us that we are not the artist. He is. And I love this thought. I had this thought too this week. Practicing gratitude is a form of worship. right? Worship is just celebrating, giving honor to something or someone, right? And so when we practice gratitude, it draws us to him, helps us realize we are not God, and it points us to him in a state of worship. So in essence, gratitude points us to God and allows us to connect and cling to God simply by saying, thank you for what you've done. I mean, it's so simple, right? Practicing gratitude points us towards God. Number 2, practicing gratitude changes us. And I think this is done in 2 ways. Well, amongst other things, 2 ways. Number 1, I'm going to make some bold claims here. I think that it is the cure for dissatisfaction. And then I also think it helps us to conquer anxiety and depression, which is a bold claim. Remember, I'm a therapist, so I really, truly do believe this. So let's start with this first idea of dissatisfaction. So in my opinion, we probably live in the most dissatisfied culture that has ever existed. And I think this is largely due to the fact that we have the ability to acquire things immediately. I could have ordered something when I walked in the door from Amazon, and it could be at my house by the time we get home, right? I want it, I can have it. But then we also have access to seeing what everyone else has or what we could have, and we want that. And then when we don't get that or we can't get that, we're dissatisfied, right? I remember a couple weeks ago, I was at my friend's house, and she has a 4 and a 7-year-old, and they were watching, I think it's called Lego Masters, and they build these like really cool Lego creations. And there were 30-second commercials in between the show, in the middle of the show. 30 seconds. When the commercial came on, the 4-year-old, I'm not kidding you, he bucked like a bronco, was kicking his legs, he was jumping off the couch saying, I want this commercial over. 30-second commercial, right? We can't even sit through a commercial anymore because we're so used to having it instant, right? And that is the root of dissatisfaction, right? And yet on the other side, when we say, man, I'm going to savor what I do have, instead of spending all our time wishing we could acquire more, right? It's like, I'm going to look over and see what my neighbor has. I'm going to look over and see what I could have. And we spend all our time looking around at what we don't have, that we miss what we do have. We spend, really, truly, what can I get next? What can I have? Instead of, what do I have? What has God given me? So gratitude allows us to savor what we have. It forces us to focus on the now and the goodness in this moment. I don't know why I'm so far from this. I keep having to walk 10 miles. So what does this look like practically? I remember Anna, when maybe the 2 times ago she preached, Pastor Anna, she was talking about her small house. Well, we share that in common. We also have a small house. It's a not quite 1,100 square feet, which is not super small. But when you have 2 tiny people running around, our 1,100 square feet quickly feels like 400. And then you add the time change, and it's dark at 5, and now we can't let them go outside really, and now our house feels like 10 square feet, right? So our house feels small. Now, it's okay to say, I desire a larger house. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when we just like meditate and perseverate on like, I need a bigger house, I need a bigger house, I need a bigger house, rather than saying, you know what, I would love a bigger house, but it's nice to have this coziness. I'll tell you what, I think about how lucky I am to have a small house every time I think, I don't want to clean. My friend has a 5,000 square foot house. No thanks. So that's what we're talking about. We're just saying, like, let me focus on what I have rather than all of the dissatisfaction around what I don't have. And that shifts us from a heart of dissatisfaction to contentment and peace very quickly. Okay, if you remember, I said 2 things. I think it also will help us to conquer anxiety and depression, okay? So there was a study done. This is according to the National Alliance for Mental Health. There was a study done that showed that thankfulness predicted a significantly lower risk for major depression, generalized anxiety, phobia, even nicotine dependence, alcohol dependence, and drug abuse. Why is that? Because research shows that practicing gratitude on a regular basis actually can decrease our stress and anxiety levels, truly. So studies even found that one single act of gratitude, expressing gratitude, can improve your mood by 10%, improve your feelings of happiness by 10% instantly, and decrease feelings of depression or negative feeling by 35%. One action. And this is not the Bible. This is non-Christian people that have studied this, which just truly aligns with what we're talking about and what Scripture says. So why is it? Why is that? It's because it changes your perspective. I know I keep kind of talking about all the same thing, but it changes your perspective. Instead of seeing the world full of what you don't have or the world of all the negative things, now you're starting to see, oh, that's really good. Oh, I do actually, that is better than I thought. Oh, okay, this thing that I thought was so terrible is actually full of really good things, just like my story at the beginning. And it doesn't take away your hardship or pain, right? It's not like, oh, I just have gratitude or I think nice thoughts and all of a sudden I feel better and my pain is gone. No, it allows us to have peace and joy and contentment in the midst of the pain. That's what I'm talking about. I will tell you, in that month of Claire's first month of life, I probably felt joy and peace and happiness like 10% of the time. And I had a newborn. I mean, how sad is that? And this really sweet, bubbly little guy running around too. And if you know me, 10% happy, 90% struggle is not my typical percentage. So for me to only have 10% was a lot at the time. But it kept me going. Like, it kept me being a good mom. It kept me hopeful. It kept me, was I doing ministry? I don't even know. Were we doing ministry at the time? I think I was. I mean, it kept me moving. I still was a therapist because I had the 10%, because I was eventually able to focus on that 10%. So it changes our perspective, but it changes your thought pattern. So Tammy, you can pull this verse up. This is so good, right? Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I know that mind work is something that we're talking a lot about in pop culture, and this idea of neuroplasticity, if you heard that term. Basically what that's saying is our minds have the ability to shift and change. Our thought patterns can change. If you're like, I have had this thought train, I cannot get out of this pattern of thinking, you can. You can. It just takes time and effort and attention, because here's how it works. It's very simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Your brain is wired for efficiency. It's very, very complex and awesome, but it's wired for efficiency. So if you think a thought on a regular basis, your brain's like, oh, all right, I guess we need to keep going down that train. And what I say is, if you think a regular basis, meaning if I invest in that type of thinking. Okay, for example, I see that we have a 49er jersey out here. If I say 49ers are the best team, which I do believe, 49ers are the best team, 49ers are the best team, 49ers are the best team, I'm just going to start believing that, especially if I teach that to my kids, right? Then all of a sudden, I learn something about the 49ers that's heinous, then I'm like, 49ers are the worst team. But that's not going to quite drive, because this is what I've been thinking my whole life, right? But eventually, you do this long enough, you can start going down this train too. And this becomes your new pathway. So the long and the short is, the more you think about something, the more you intentionally focus on a thought, the more it will become your standard way of belief and your standard, thought of practice. So practicing gratitude changes our perspective on what we see, but it also, the more you think I'm really grateful for this. Okay, oh man, that's starting to make my mood shift. That's starting to make my thought pattern more positive. Oh, and you know what else? I'm starting to see the things that are good. And because my brain is like, oh, those things are good. You've said those things are good. This is where we need to spend our time and attention. Then I'm going to look for those things for you. So it changes our perspective. It changes our thought pattern, which is really powerful. And then it also can shift our relationships, which increases our mood. So would you prefer to be in a relationship with someone who's very appreciative, and there's a reciprocity of appreciation, or would you prefer to be in a relationship where no one ever says thank you, take you for granted? Oh, that sounds like being a parent. So when you have a reciprocity of appreciation, there's just a stronger bond, and there's a more positive connection. But I think even more pertinent for us today is if we can minimize our social comparison, meaning instead of looking at what she's got at her house and what they've got in their family and what's going on over here and everything else, That decreases envy, which then builds stronger relationships. Because if I'm saying, you've got this great stuff going on, I know you do, whatever, but I'm going to focus on what I have here, now I don't have all this interpersonal grossness between these people. Now we can have strong relationships because I'm not trying to get what they have or envious of them for what God's given them when God's given me all this stuff. And by the way, this is something I'm actively working on right now. This is hard to not compare. It is really, really hard, especially when it's like all in your face, all around you at all times. And then I've got one more thought for us on this one. It also practicing gratitude keeps us in the present. It keeps us in the present. Research shows that the more present we are, the happier we are. And that's because anxiety is a fear of the future and the focus of the past. It's not about what's present. It's, I wonder if this could happen. I'm worried this could happen because this did happen before. So if we can stay in the present and focus on what's here and now and going on now, we don't give in to fear of the future. We don't really ruminate on the past because we're so grateful for what's here. For example, I talk to a lot of moms who agree with me on this one. You'll be just driving the car, everything's fine, and then you're like, what if we got in a car accident and my kids got thrown from the car and they died and this would be really terrible. Okay, so that's a intrusive thought. As parents, we have things like that because we care about these people so much, these little rascals. We care about them so much. So what I'm saying is not, you can't stop yourself from thinking that, but what you can do is not ruminate on okay, now what am I going to do? And now I'm anxious, and now my stomach's hurting, and now this is really bad. Instead, we say, whoa, okay, that would be terrible. That would be terrible. But in this moment right now, we are safe. My sweet kids are in the back causing commotion, but I'm going to celebrate them, be grateful for that. And then I'm going to sing some songs with them. The songs I don't want to sing anymore because I've heard them 1,000 times. You know what I'm talking about? So that's what I'm saying about gratitude. It helps us to be in the present, helps us to conquer disappointment, and it helps us to minimize our anxiety and our depression significantly. Oh, and I forgot. This verse too, so good. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests, ... So Paul is saying, when instead of being anxious, ask God for things in prayer, but then he throws in this with thanksgiving. It almost feels like, why did you add that in? It feels kind of weird. But I think it's because, as I was meditating out this week, I think it's because it primes us, Thanksgiving primes us to be ready for what God's going to give us. He says, not right now. You're like, okay, I can be content with what I have. He says, yeah, let's do this thing. Great, because I'm grateful for whatever you're going to give us. So it primes us truly to be ready for whatever it is God has for us. So practicing gratitude changes us. And I got one more point. I'm like, wow, the time. Okay, practicing gratitude changes us. Practicing gratitude points us to God. And then I think truly most importantly, practicing gratitude points others to God. Okay, so one of the last things that Jesus says to his disciples in Matthew 28 is, go and make disciples. Go and make disciples. Go and do some more of this stuff that I've been doing with you. Because it is our job not to keep this beautiful gift of salvation and the life and the abundant life that Jesus offers to ourselves. We're supposed to go and share it. You know, one of the best ways to share it, live a life that shows something different than how the rest of this world is living, right? If I'm living dissatisfied and frustrated and overly anxious and just down in the dumps at all times because I can't see the goodness that God has given me, that ain't looking good to the hurting world. Come to my church, come be a Christian. Are they like you? Because that doesn't seem very fun. The world is desperately trying to feel better. Listen to this. 2022, Americans spent $36 billion on home entertainment. 1 year, $36 billion on home entertainment. I'm not even talking about going to the movies. $5.6 million on mental health. $37.6 billion, you ready for this? This one's from 2018. Alcohol. $37 billion on alcohol. And you know why people are doing those things? Because they want to feel good. And those can help. Some of those things are great tools that God has given us, but none of those things are going to fill the God-sized hole that we have inside of us, right? And so it's our responsibility to live a life that is enticing to the outside world and then point them back to Jesus as to why we feel the way we feel. My 10% joy and peace and contentment in the first month of Claire's life was not because of anything to do with me. It was because I knew that God was with me and I had hope that things were going to work out. If nothing else, in heaven. The world needs that 10%. That 10% can save someone's life. But if we're not living and practicing gratitude, they don't want it. All right. So if practicing gratitude is so good because it draws us towards God, changes us, and leads others towards God, how do we do it? Well, first of all, it needs to be done. It needs to be a practice, a routine, right? It can't just be what we do at Thanksgiving time. That's as ridiculous, right, as saying, I only love my spouse on Valentine's Day. It's the only day I have to do it. Right? I am only grateful during Thanksgiving. That's a great time to remind us about this practice of gratitude, but it does not need to be the only time we do it. It needs to be a regular habit. So let's make it a habit. Practical ideas. I'm all about the practical. Set a timer. Set a timer every day at 12. Like, I'm going to practice gratitude right now. Maybe, to me, this is an even better idea. Maybe you practice it when it's really hard. So I know for me, I'm going to get some amens from the parents out there. Bedtime is hard. The end of the day, you've got nothing left. It feels like so cruel that your children will be so difficult at bedtime because you've nothing left. And, I'll be like, Levi will be like, can I have this one more thing? I'm like, okay. Mommy, what? Okay, open the door one more time. Mommy, Levi, I have to go to bed now because I'm feeling frustrated. And he's like, okay, Mommy. He knows what frustrated means. Right? So what I thought that I'm going to do actively, along with you, hopefully, is I'm going to come into bedtime with the mindset of like, this is a great opportunity for me to practice gratitude. And I'm going to pray in advance, and I'm going to come in, I'm just going to really celebrate my son in that time. Because it's never Claire. Claire would just pop in her crib and see you later. It's always Levi. So instead of, being frustrated, like, oh, the timer, I'm so tired or whatever, sometimes, and I can say, I do this sometimes, look at him and say, you are the boy that we have prayed for. You are the boy that God ordained for this time. Yeah. I am grateful for you. I'm grateful. So many parents don't get this. Some parents lose their children. Really, really investing in that practice of gratitude. And as you do that, don't just say like, oh, Levi, I'm great. Like, really drink in that moment. The more that you can connect to something with all of your senses, the more impactful it will be for you, and the better it will be later, and the more likely you're going to be to do it. So as you're doing that, and as you're sitting there and you're really trying to drink in this moment, just like close your eyes, breathe for a second, look at the thing you're grateful for. And I know this might sound really cheesy, but I'm telling you, it really works. It really makes it more impactful. Amen. You have to invest in the process. You have to be intentional. It's not just going to happen. It's like working out a muscle. My husband, personal trainer, he will tell you, you can't just look at something and say, I want to be strong now. I'm going to be strong right now, right? You have to practice. You have to do all the lifting. And that's what we're doing. We're doing the mental lifting, the practice, the regular, consistent, I'm going to make this a habit. It also takes a commitment. So this is interesting. So there was another study. There are so many studies about gratitude, by the way. I mean, these were like the top 4 Google searches. UC Davis did a study, I think it was like 2018, and they had a group of people write letters of gratitude for somebody else, and then a group of people that did nothing. And then there was a third group, I can never remember, so we're not going to worry about them. Those are the important groups. So what they found was after 4 weeks, so it wasn't instant, after 4 weeks, the group that had written the letters of gratitude, they had a significant increase in mood. So it wasn't right away. It took some time. So know that if you're going to make gratitude a practice and you're like, I really want this to affect my mood and change me so I can, and connect me to God, it might not be immediate. But what they found was after 12 weeks, those effects were still present. So it took a little bit of time, but the effects were still present. So you have to be a little bit patient. And lastly, let's make it a joy, not an obligation. Let's make it a joy, not an obligation. Not like, oh, I got to do this other thing and practice gratitude. Really celebrate it. Really, like I said, really drink it in. Write it down. Share it with somebody. All right, music team. You can come on up. So as a professor and a therapist, I recognized human behavior. And if we don't set some level of intention, this will be a great word, right? Or I hope it was a good word. I don't. But it will be just that. And I know we say this every week from this stage. So my hope is that in this time, you will set a goal, a practical goal, something that you are going to do that's going to help you begin to practice gratitude. The world is too broken and too hurting, and so are we, by the way, to miss this opportunity for connection with God and for personal growth. Because when we are connected to God, we naturally will change. And then, man, that's super attractive to the world around us. So we always have this time at the end, we call it the reflection time. And this is when you get to kind of think and pray. The Holy Spirit is speaking something to you, guaranteed. All you have to do is listen and then say, okay, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I will do that. Maybe it's I will find a time that's hard for me to be grateful and I will practice there. Or maybe it's find a time that's really easy for you to be grateful and practice there. But enough practice, then it becomes a habit, right? And then it becomes normal, and then soon you're like, man, my mood is really changing. By the way, this is not easy. I talk about it like it's just the simplest thing. It's not, it's hard. It's really hard. Our brains are actually wired for protection, which means they're wired to see the negative. So it really does take in a lot of intention. So I want to start us off. If you're comfortable, just close your eyes. I'm not going to do anything weird. I just want to read this verse over you, this one simple verse that I started to read over. I try to make it a practice in the morning, and especially my hard mornings. And it says in Psalm 118, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Let me read it one more time. This is the day the Lord has made for you. Rejoice and be glad in it. So just keep your eyes closed for a second. This is the day the Lord has made for you. So no matter what the day looks like, remember that God has given it to you. How will you practice gratitude as you walk through your day? So as I mentioned, as we go through our time of music now, just meditate on that verse and allow God to tell you whatever else He wants to teach you about practicing gratitude.